This has been a fascinating conference. For me, there was one magic moment in it, and that was listening to my old friend Norman Stone, who I haven't participated in a public debate with since at Cambridge. And the last time I heard him make a speech, he was wearing a helmet of the Austro-Hungarian army while delivering a powerful speech. I remember he also described on that occasion my speech with the words, "All that twitters is not gold." Anyway, I've forgiven you, Norman. It was a pleasure to hear you today. I'm sure the audience everyone here has had enough of Britain and Brexit, and the title of the conference was meant to be about where is Europe going, the future of Europe, and not just about Britain's position. The question has been asked, is change, reform possible? Professor Espada made a very persuasive case, but I think we have to be careful that when we advocate a specific change, we aren't just choosing some political priority of our own, like labour market flexibility. There are people in the European Union, perfectly respectable people, who don't believe in it. I believe in it very, very strongly. But I think when we say, can the European Union change, it's not just a question of changing policies, it's a question of having structures that are actually open and can facilitate change and can facilitate democracy. That seems to me the real problem of the European Union. I remember many, many years ago, I was in a train in England going to some city in the north, and I happened to bump into Tony Blair, who was then the leader of the opposition, and he said, "Could I have a word with you?" And he said, "I want to talk to you about Europe." And he said, "Britain has problems with Europe, but the problem is we're never constructive enough. We don't get in there. We don't become positive enough. If we were just positive, everyone would come round to our way of thinking." Well, I said to him, "Tony, I've seen that film 3 times, and it always has the same rather sad ending." And I think we've learned the hard way. Mr. Blair adopted a very constructive, positive approach to Europe. He gave away part of our budget rebate. He seemed to get very, very little in exchange. And all this, I think, has contributed to the mood that we've been discussing with reference to Britain's relations with the EU. I think one problem with the EU in terms of democracy is its sheer incomprehensibility, utterly incomprehensible to the average citizen. I wonder how many people in this room could specifically define qualified majority voting, or give a precise description of co-decision, or define subsidiarity, or tell us who are the 5 presidents. Most people in Britain can't name the member of the European Parliament either. Something, if Europe is ever to work, has to be done to simplify the whole structure. A lot of our arguments today have been about the nation state, and although it's not been explicitly stated in this conference today, we do hear a lot of continental politicians saying the day of the nation state is over. And I think most people in Britain don't really believe that. They believe that the nation state is still the building block of the international system. We have this view, because of the horrific recent history of what happened in Europe, of the nation state. But I would argue loving one's own country, which is a powerful motive force, doesn't require that you dislike or hate another country. And of course, we need regional architecture in Europe. But there's a very interesting point. Sometimes people in favor of European integration say, "Oh, this is happening all over the world. There is Mercosur, there is ASEAN, and so on, all these different regional structures." There's nowhere else in the world that has imitated the institutions of the European Union. You don't have a Supreme Court of NAFTA, you don't have a NAFTA parliament, you don't have a NAFTA president. I mean, imagine how the United States would react if it had a Supreme Court located in Ottawa or a parliament located in Mexico City. Nobody has followed the architecture of the European Union. And of course we could have some sort of geographical architecture without the degree of integration we've had. We had a lot of talk about the bicycling metaphor, and that, I think, is one of the weaknesses of Europe. One does hear European spokesmen saying, Europe is like the man on the bicycle. We must continue to bicycle or we will fall off. I.e., we've got to integrate in order to have something to do, in order to have a purpose. Integration, integration, integration for the sake of integration. And it's not actually what it should be, integration to solve a problem. I think we spend a lot of time denouncing extremists and populists. Maybe there's something going wrong underneath. Of course, populists may simplify, populists may go over certain ethical boundaries that we don't want to, and they should be condemned when they do that. But also, they may just be portraying and articulating or just expressing the frustrations that many people feel, and we owe it as a duty to listen to them. We had a lot of, rather surprisingly, we had quite a lot of talk about foreign policy in the conference today. You know, the fact that Europe is a market of 500 million people doesn't make it a superpower. It doesn't even make it a geopolitical player. Europe may be good at trade, but a 500 million market doesn't make you a player in geopolitical politics. And Europe has great difficulty in, you can think of any foreign policy question, whether it be Libya, Iraq, Syria, the Falklands War, recognition of Kosovo. Europe doesn't manage to come to a single view on any of them. And yet at the same time, Europe has, whatever it is, 300 embassies throughout the world. I don't know what they're doing. I once asked the EU's ambassador to China, I said, we've got a German embassy there, an Italian embassy there, a French embassy there, a British embassy there. What are you going to do that the other embassies can't do? And I have to say, the only reply I got was, well, we're going to major on human rights. Well, I think that probably made life very easy for the other diplomats in Beijing. We had quite a lot of discussion about Russia. I think perhaps Mr. Rossovsky and I rather disagree about this, but I rather agreed with the views of Norman Stone and Mr. Jasinski that actually it is a bit of a tragedy the way that Russian-EU relations have developed. I was very involved in that in the 90s myself. There was a lot of debt forgiveness. There was a lot of technical help given to Russia, but we were very much closer to Russia then than now. There was, as was said, even talk about Russia becoming a member of NATO. Of course, I am not an admirer of Mr. Putin, but I think the EU did not handle the Ukrainian crisis well, and I was very interested to see that that was the view of Mr. Gorbachev delivered just a few days ago. We had from David Goodhart and Mr. Mosbacher quite a lot about the UK referendum and the different political consequences that were coming out of that. The question was asked, will this referendum settle the European issue? I don't think it will settle it entirely, whatever happens, because it will depend on what happens next. If Britain votes to remain in, of course there won't be another referendum for quite a period, but public opinion, I think in Britain, underlying public opinion, will remain questioning and sceptical about transfers of power. And if there were to be a sudden degree of integration that was judged needless, people would be, I think, very sceptical about that. I mean, it was quite interesting. When we had the Scottish referendum, that was won by a 10-point margin, but a few weeks later, there seemed to be in opinion polls more people in favour of independence that had voted for it in the referendum. And I think that might well be the situation that would turn out with the EU as well. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been very kind to we British people at this conference. It's very nice of you to express that you want us to remain in the EU. Andrew Lillico put forward, I thought, the very ingenious idea that if we left, we were going to make you more prosperous. But I think you're probably rejecting or not going along with that thesis. But it was very nice that so many people argued that you wanted us to say. But I do just say this. We're not going to leave the world. We're not going to depart. We're not going to disappear over the horizon into some unseen part of the universe. Cooperation between Britain and the countries of Europe will continue, not just on trade, but you hear things like there will be a threat to collaboration between the universities of Europe and the universities of the UK. That things like military cooperation between France and England would end. I don't believe that would happen for a moment. And there might even be talk, if we did leave, of having a different sort of Europe and having different sort of architecture. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for putting up with us all. Thank you very much for putting up with me in particular twice. And it's been a very great conference. And I would like to thank John O'Sullivan and Jerry very much for organizing it. Thank you so much.